There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
Bob, if only the introduction to our show was as cool as that one.
Man, it doesn't get much better than that, Jimmy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Take Two, the movie program on Public Radio KCBX, broadcasting from San Luis Obispo, California. On tonight's program, we're not going to be talking about that legendary television show. We're actually going to be talking about that which was talking to you in that intro, the television telling you that they're in control of the vertical, the horizontal. They're essentially in control. Tonight on Take Two, a look at the media through motion pictures, and across the aisle from me, the one, the only Bob Whiteford.
And across the aisle from me, he is in control, and I'm not talking about Alexander Haig, your friend and mine, Jim Dee.
Good to see you, Bob.
Good to see you too, Jimmy. It's been a while.
It's been a little while, but I think we've got a fascinating show tonight as far as looking at the media through film. In fact, you know, when we've done programs, we've done a program on politics and looking at political movies to try to get that underbelly, the inner workings of politics. Hey, there's countless great movies to really, you know, explore those themes. I think tonight, not only do we have some hand-picked great movies to talk to you about, but, you know, media is one of the most curious things today. I would have to say that the media is sometimes reflecting upon itself. You know, what is good journalism? What is bad journalism? What is infotainment? Trying to almost decipher, well, we have a hard enough time deciphering the messages being given to us from the media, but sometimes we have to question the media. And tonight on Take Two, a handful of really interesting films to perhaps get a better grasp on that which we call the media.
You know, it's interesting, Jimmy. I mean, these days, the media, for many years in this country, was always a place where you would go to find out the truth. Now we live in a time where the media is sometimes playing hard and fast with a manipulated truth or an untruth. And it's very difficult to unravel that sometimes. Of course, now with the computers and the internet, at least for now anyway, you can, as we were talking about this morning, you can look up a source of a story from 4 different angles and get an idea of what really happened. That is, of course, if you can still think critically. That's a question too. But tonight's movie offerings will be discussing different parts of this most interesting and compelling subject matter.
Yeah, when is media, whether it's newspapers, whether it's television, whether it's this wonderful medium of radio, when is it a public service? When is it self-serving? It's sometimes it's hard to figure it out.
When is it reporting the news, and when is it the news?
Yeah.
Very strange.
Remember the days, Bob, when we had a half hour of news with Walter Cronkite or Chet Huntley and David Brinkley? I mean, that was it. Half hour news a day, it seemed to be adequate. Of course, nowadays we have a plethora of news channels and news 24/7.
That doesn't seem to tell you very much, which I find kind of curious. But anyhow, let's get on with it, Jimmy.
We're first going to start with a look at media itself as being an extremely powerful entity. And again, it's those in control. Are they doing a public service, or are they self-serving? And we want to. We were reflecting on the program that we did, a couple of programs on Orson Welles. We're going to play a little snippet of something that really put him on the map. He, of course, with his Mercury Radio Theater, kept America enthralled with great radio plays. But it was back in 1938. His Halloween show presenting The War of the Worlds that had the entire country in a panic. And the reason we're going to play a little bit of this for you, it's fun to listen to start with, but again, we want to show the power of the media. Here's the opening of the famous Mercury Players Theater radio show with Orson Welles of War of the Worlds.
The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects, vast, cool, and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the Great Disillusionment. It was near the end of October. Business was better. The war scare was over. More men were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crosley service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
From the 1938 broadcast by Orson Welles of War of the Worlds, I think the key sentence there, Bob, at the end, that 32 million people were listening in on the radio, probably his radio audience back then. But again, what we're trying to focus on here is the power of this medium of radio and how, in this case, War of the Worlds just had a grip on the entire nation. And I think, even there, our next film we're going to be just briefly mentioning is Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, considered one of the greatest films of all time. And here again, power is exemplified by a media mogul, Charles Foster Kane, William Randolph Hearst. But I think Welles knew full well the power of the medium of radio, of media in general, through his radio broadcasts, and then he worked it well into Citizen Kane.
Well, what's interesting about the War of the Worlds is that I believe even during our Wells show, when we were discussing this, because you can't not discuss it, he claimed total innocence after the disaster, in the aftermath of this, the panic. And remember, folks, this is 1938. There's no TiVo. There's no, there's no tape recorders, cassette recorders, or CD recorders, or anything. People are coming in halfway through the broadcast. like like people were doing up until a couple of years ago. You come in the middle of the game. You come home from work and you sit down, you turn the game on. You've missed everything before, so you don't know for sure what you have to get caught up. And unfortunately, for millions of Americans getting caught up in this brilliant hoax, they didn't realize it was a hoax. And the night that panicked America. And I think it really showed, Jimmy, the power of the media over a harried population. By harried, I mean these are people that are not. There's millions of people that'll sit down by the clock and tune in. There's other people. This is America. We're jumping 24 hours a day, so people are popping in and popping out. But in this case, they popped in, and what they heard blew their minds and freaked them out. And that's the power of the medium.
It really is. And, let's play another clip here. Orson Welles did move on to make one of the greatest films of all time, Citizen Kane. And of all the cinematic bravura of that film, at the heart of it is the fact that here is Charles Foster Kane, who published newspapers and by any means necessary was manipulating public opinion, was not using his papers perhaps as a public service, but for self-serving, even starting wars. And, it's that, how can we put it, that he knew that his newspapers could light a fire under anything, and wielding that power is at the core of Citizen Kane, and how, using this powerful, powerful medium of newspapers, of news, of media, Citizen Kane and Charles Foster Kane, built a castle to himself. That doesn't get too much more powerful than that if you're in charge or if you have a grip on the media.
Well, Jim, it's always been the case. I mean, we're talking about radio. Citizen Kane deals with newspapers, which were very big and powerful before radio and during radio. They're not really very powerful anymore because most people already know the news before you sit down to read it anyway. But at that time, especially the turn of the last century, that's how people found out what was going on. And by reading that, when someone who's publishing it is creating the news as opposed to reporting the news, it can have very dangerous consequences. And Wells nails it in Citizen Kane. Here's
a clip from Citizen Kane. This is Orson Welles and James Cotton. James Cotton, very, shall we say, he has a snootful in this one, but he's very upset with his good friend, Charles Foster Kane, who has used his newspaper for not the most beneficial or, shall we say, public service means. This is from Citizen Kane.
I'm drunk. Well, if you got drunk to talk to me about Miss Alexander, don't bother. I'm not interested. I've set back the sacred cause of reform. Is that it? All right. That's the way they want it. The people have made that choice. It's obvious the people prefer Jim Geddes to me.
You talk about the people as though you own them, as though they belong to you. Goodness. As long as I can remember, you've talked about giving the people their rights, as if you could make them a present of liberty, as a reward for services rendered.
Jed.
Remember the working man?
I'll get drunk too, Jedediah. It'll do any good.
That won't do any good. Besides, you never get drunk. You used to write an awful lot about the working man.
Oh, go on home.
He's turning into something called organized labor. You're not going to like that one little bit when you find out it means that your working man expects something as his right, not as your gift, Charlie. When your precious underprivileged really get together, oh boy, That's going to add up to something bigger than your privilege, and I don't know what you'll do. Sail away to a desert island, probably, and lord it over the monkeys.
I wouldn't worry about it too much, Jed. There'll probably be a few of them there to let me know when I do something wrong.
You may not always be so lucky.
You're not very drunk.
Drunk, what do you care? You don't care about anything except you. You just want to persuade people that you love them so much that they ought to love you back. Only you want love on your own terms.
Citizen Kane, the great James Cotton and Orson Welles. You know, Bob, one of the keys to this film, of course, it's such an incredible film, but here is a man who we've just had a description of how he wants people to love them, even if it's on his own terms, through manipulation, and yet he owns all of these newspapers. He's the man who should be giving you the straight, factual journalism, and when we kind of learn in this film the personality, the nature of this person, this is not the kind of a person that you want running a newspaper empire.
Well, you know what's interesting, Jim, and I think the message of Citizen Kane is as timely today as when it was released in 1941. All this power consolidated in the hands of one person is dangerous.
Yes.
The drive to control, to buy up, to beat down all his opponents and all his competitors, and just to create one monolithic point of view. There's a drive to do that, but then once you've consolidated all that power, then your personality flaws go unchecked. And that's what I think is very interesting about this scene, because Joseph Cotton and Orson Welles go way back together.
Yes. And
this is his best friend basically telling him that he is corrupt, he's evil, and that he's just, I mean, the guy he's off the beam, and he's wrong. And that's the one thing you can't say to someone like this, that they're wrong. Because he nails it when he says, you give the rights to people that you think you deserve to give them, as opposed to they have these. These are inalienable. No, he's giving them something that's theirs. And I wonder if anyone will ever have this discussion with Rupert Murdoch. I tend to think not. I tend to think he's surrounded by a bunch of people who just agree with them.
I would say so.
And that's why the message stays the same today.
Oh, yeah. Very, very timely and perfect example right there, Bob. That's great. Now, we're going to move on next to the actual medium itself, in the fact that, we're going to move on to television here, but there is something about television, which is one of the many media out there, that has such a powerful effect. We go from the actual power of media itself, but what is it about television or newspapers or radio that catapults things to another level? What is the magic of television itself, where being on television somehow transforms you into something else? We have a couple of movies we like to bring up that are both well, the first one is Being There, directed by Hal Ashby. Wonderful performance by Peter Sellers as the gardener, who is somewhat of a simpleton, who has been spoon-fed with television, and in this case has created a very peaceful, quiet, but, shall we say, limited mentally character. He's wonderful, he's charming, but perhaps his only connection with the world seems to be through television. If you've seen this film recently, it was made in 79. And Peter Sellers, a gardener in this home, he's never been outside, but he is pretty much addicted to television. That's his only connection with the world. The person who employs him dies, he's cast out into the world, and all of a sudden he's in a world he's never seen before. The only world he understands is television. And yet, through being in the right place at the right time, the simple gardener, Chauncey Gardner, is catapulted to heights that probably he never could have dreamed of. He wouldn't even think of this stuff just because of his nature. I don't know if you have any other interesting things to say about this film. It's funny. Being there, you think about Shirley MacLaine, wonderful Melvin Douglas does a great part in this.
Jack Warden.
Jack Warden is the president of the United States. But, throughout this entire film, there's televisions going on here and there, and the impact of television on all these figures, from the president on down to this very simple-minded gardener, is profound.
Jim, it reminds me a little bit, just to mention in passing, is Martin Scorsese's great comedy, King of Comedy.
Oh, we should have...
With Robert De Niro as Rupert Pupkin.
Oh,
and
yes.
How his whole, he's a hack comic with no hope, lives with his mother, works as a messenger, wears white square-toed loafers, and he goes to great lengths to get his big break. He gets on television literally by holding Jerry Lewis hostage.
Yes.
And becomes a media sensation. And Being There touches upon that too. The idea that even the most simplest and most, in Chauncey Gardner's case, really kind of out of touch with reality, except what he sees on television, which I think makes him out of touch with reality, but regurgitating that unreality on TV, now he's looked at as a genius. And television still blows my mind. I mean, you and I both have been on television, Jim, and it's amazing that when you're on television, suddenly everything you say has all this greater meaning than when you're talking on a street corner or talking to someone in person. But if I'm on that box and I'm in your living room saying it, suddenly I know something, that I didn't know talking to you in person. I mean, the medium, it's got a weird, warped power all its own. And Being There really nails it.
Here's a scene from Being There, and in this case, Peter Sellers, who is the naive and very simple-minded gardener, has essentially bumped into Melvin Douglas, who is a multi-millionaire, who is friends with the president. Well, to make a long story short, the vice president of the United States was going to appear on the Tonight-like show that is on, and they asked Chauncey Gardner to go in the vice president's place. I mean, things are happening very fast for Chauncey Gardner. So here is the first time Chauncey Gardner has been on TV in Being There.
Mr. Gardner. Well, how very nice to have you with us this evening, Mr. Gardner.
Hello, Gary.
This is Miss Annie Lawson,
Hello,
Mr. Chauncey Gardner.
Hi, how do you do?
Hello.
Mr. Gardner.
Oh, yes.
Join me.
Yes.
Well,
Excuse me.
I'd like very much to thank you for joining us on such short notice and filling in for the Vice President.
Yes. Yes.
It's always somewhat surprising to find men like yourself working so intimately with the President and yet somehow managing to remain relatively unknown.
Yes. It is surprising. Yes.
Yes, of course. Well, your anonymity is certainly likely to be a thing of the past from now on.
Oh. Good.
Well, I assume, since the President quoted you, that you're inclined to agree with his view of the economy.
Oh? Which view?
The President compared the economy of this country to a garden, and he stated, after a period of decline, a time of growth would naturally follow.
Yes, it is possible for everything to grow strong. And there is plenty of room for new trees and new flowers of all kinds.
So you're saying, Mr. Gardner, this is just another season in the garden, so to speak?
Yes, yes. A garden needs a lot of care and a lot of love. And if you give your garden a lot of love, things grow. But first, some things must wither. Some trees die,
Is that Gardner?
fresh
Yeah,
young saplings
Chauncey
take
Gardner.
their place.
No, he's a
In the
real
fall
gardener.
season, you can
He does
watch your
talk like
garden
one.
become very beautiful.
But I think he's brilliant.
It's a scene from Hal Ashby's film Being There, and Peter Sellers as Chauncey Gardner making it on The Tonight Show, and probably a household name right after that due to the power of television. And one more quick one we want to get in. I love you bring up King of Comedy, Bob, with Rupert Pupkin becoming essentially a media star through questionable means. But another great film, Peter Weir, wonderful director from Australia, doesn't make movies too often, but when he does, they're really great. And of course, he examined the media in his film starring Jim Carrey called The Truman Show. And here again, Bob, I was thinking about this film. We'll play the introduction for The Truman Show, but the magic of television, you'd rather watch someone's life on this box and this tube rather than maybe watching the life of your neighbor in real life, or let me see what my friend's doing down the street there. No, let's turn on the TV and watch the life on the TV.
I know, and this is kind of like, when I think of The Truman Show, I think of it as perhaps the ultimate reality show.
Before, apparently, there were reality shows.
Exactly.
I think this came out in 98. Excuse me if I'm not...
I think that's about right. It just kind of probably gave him the idea. And this is a fascinating film. And it's got the same satirical brilliance as Being There and King of Comedy. The great filmmakers seem to know how to bring that, especially where television's concerned. It seems like an easy mark for good filmmakers to make some pretty profound statements about our culture.
Yes. Well, here's a clip from The Truman Show. It might remind you of this fine film. I mean, the key here is they'll talk about the Truman Show and the viewership. The key is the fact that Truman doesn't know he's on the show. This is from The Truman Show.
1.7 billion were there for his birth. 220 countries tuned in for his first step. The world stood still for that stolen kiss. And as he grew, so did the technology. An entire human life recorded on an intricate network of hidden cameras and broadcast live and unedited 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to an audience around the globe. Coming to you now from Sea Haven Island, enclosed in the largest studio ever constructed, and along with the Great Wall of China, one of only 2 man-made structures visible from space. Now, in its 30th great year, it's The Truman Show!
That's from Peter Weir's great take on the media with Jim Carrey. It's The Truman Show from 1998. If you haven't seen it, give it another try. In fact, all of the movies on tonight's program, you can make some double features with, like Being There and Truman Show make a nice double bill. Some of these other ones we'll get to in our second half hour. In fact, we're already at the halfway point. This is Public Radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara, and we're streaming across the world at kcbx.org. Bob and I will be back with more talk about movies and media.
You're listening to Take Two on Public Radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara. Streaming at kcbx.org. And you can write to us at movies@kcbx.org.
Support for KCBX comes from American Flatbread, all-natural pizzas. The bakers at American Flatbread invite you to their restaurant in Los Alamos, open every Friday and Saturday evening for dinner from 5 to 10. More information at foodremembers.com. We're back on Take Two, the movie program. My name is Jim Dee. I'm here with my good friend Bob Whiteford. And as we try to unravel what the media is, whether it is newspapers, television, or radio, when is it a good messenger? When is it an inappropriate messenger? Why does it have such an effect on our lives? And, well, just try to untangle it. And we have some movies that we've been talking about on this program to help you untangle that which we call the media. And Bob, you know, the next couple of films we want to talk about good journalism and bad journalism. I think one of the quintessential films showing newspapers in action, doing the right thing, going in the right direction, going for the truth, we have to look at All the President's Men with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman, not to mention Jack Warden's also in this great film.
Gosh, Jack Warden is popping up all over the place here, and I'm very pleased.
And the editor of, I guess it's the Washington Post, Jason Robards, who
as Ben Bradley,
is fantastic in this. I mean, he's the ultimate Perry White. You know, it's and just the process of getting that news into the paper with facts. Is it a front page story? Is it a page 2 story? Is it a page 20 story? I mean, they really get into that process in this movie.
And are the facts right? Can we stand by this story? Because when you're dealing with a story about the White House, and it's not a positive story, you know you got a lot of flack coming your way. Can you stand the heat? And that's a big part of this film. I mean, of course it deals with the Watergate conspiracy and Deep Throat and the reporters, Woodward and Bernstein. But the interesting aspect, I just saw the film recently, Jim, and what I found interesting this time around was watching the round-robin discussions in the editor's office as they debated the story itself and a lot of different sides of what their strategy. Could they withstand a legal challenge? A lot of the sources are unnamed for obvious reasons. You know, can they verify? Can they stand up to what would be a withering assault from a White House that was running amok? And this film stands up really well as an example of great journalism. It's kind of like Jason Robards' Ben Bradley is kind of a lot different from Orson Welles' Charles Foster Kane.
Oh, yes.
I mean, this is 70 years later, and it's interesting. I mean, Woodward and Bernstein are still out there. I think Woodward needs to go back and see this movie a few times.
You're
think
right.
he may have forgotten it. But this is a great film, and it captures a moment in American history. Not maybe a great moment, In fact, a very dangerous moment, but it's a moment when the media did their job and helped the country get back on track. And I mean that in terms of our democratic institutions, as opposed to rolling over and not doing their job, which has been the complaint lately. So this is a great film about media doing the right thing in a free society.
And as you said, Bob, if it comes from the White House, it's a hot potato. And, we've heard about news in the last 5-10 years, where there's a press release from the White House and it's considered news. I mean, they just read the press release or just elaborate on something coming from the White House or from other agencies of our government. And in this case, for instance, I love the scene. If you just saw it recently, Bob, Redford and Hoffman. Boy, that was a bad one. Go to Jason Robards, the editor, and they think they have a hot story because they're starting to crack the Watergate case. And they think it's page one news. Jason Robards simply looks at it. He says, "Who is your source?" And I think Redford says, "Well, it was a source at the White House." And Robards says, "How high up is this White House source?" And Redford just sort of looks at him blankly. I mean, it could have been not someone too high up on the hierarchy of the White House. And Jason Robards says, work on it some more, or get a better source or something like that. I mean, even though they've got some very hot news, very seemingly important news, Robards demands that better source of the material. It's great journalism in action.
Jim, there was another great scene. I think we're both loving Jason Robards in this movie.
Yes.
I think it's a scene not long afterwards when he can see the story is developing.
Yes.
And he kind of sits back in his office and he puts his loafers up on his desk and he goes, "I don't know what we got here. There's something here. Yeah. I don't know what it is." And I'm just thinking to myself, he's just it's dawning on him that his cub reporters are actually uncovering something serious.
Mm-hmm.
His news sense is tingling.
Yes.
And he can tell that this is going to be big. And he can see, he's already seeing 3 steps ahead. This is going to be a major story. It's an election year. Of course, it didn't quite turn out that way. It took like a year more to develop than I think he thought. But still, it's a telling scene. Just the way he puts his feet up there and he's kind of saying to no one in particular, "I don't know what we have here."
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Here's a scene from All the President's Men. Part of the investigative reporting by Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford includes interviewing people who were on the periphery, perhaps a spouse of a person who was involved with all this slush fund money. And they get their news and information bit by bit from people. And Dustin Hoffman just spent a lot of time with a woman who knew a lot that was going on in the Nixon administration. And here they are trying to get the information down. This is Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford in All the President's Men.
In one 6-day period, over $6 million came in. You wouldn't believe what was going on inside that woman. I mean, the stuff was just ready to pour out of her, and I'm pouring down the cups of coffee trying to get it out of her before she throws me out of the house.
Okay, give me your notes so I can
These are the notes.
These are the notes?
Yeah, I got stuff on napkins matched because I'm writing in the bathroom while she's getting the coffee. I'm a walking litter basket.
You're crazy.
Here.
How am I going to...
Well, you'd be crazy, too, if you were operating on 20 cups of coffee.
Well, could you give me something I can get down?
I got it all. Okay, right. Mitchell was in control.
Wait a minute.
There were men working under Mitchell.
How many?
I don't know how many, but the men working under Mitchell were the ones that received the money from the slush fund.
Okay, do we know how much money we're talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these men are the key to what that money was used for. Boy, that woman was paranoid. At one point, I suddenly wondered how high up this thing goes, and her paranoia finally got to me. I thought what we had was so hot that any minute CBS or NBC are going to come in through the windows and take the story away.
You're both paranoid. She's afraid of John Mitchell, and you're afraid of Walter Cronkite.
Right.
Can we go back to what she said?
Yeah. Here. LP&M.
What do you mean?
LP&M. She'd only give me initials.
Initials?
Yeah, the initials are the name of the men that worked under Mitchell. LP&M.
You couldn't get the names?
If I could have gotten the names, I would have gotten the names. I'm with the woman trying to get anything I can. She said L, P, and M. That's all she would give me, are the people who worked under Mitchell. She said something about Mitchell. She hates him.
She said that?
Here, she said John Mitchell. If you guys could get John Mitchell, that would be beautiful.
Wait a minute. What's this here? Where are you reading about Sloan?
Sloan. Sloan was the treasurer of the committee to
His
re-elect.
wife did what?
His wife...
And off they go. Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford, doing investigative reporting the way it should be done from All the President's Men. Now, Bob and I both highly recommend this film as far as seeing good journalism in action. And now we're going to move on to a film that I think kind of slipped under the radar, but it's a very good film about bad journalism. It's a film called Shattered Glass. It's based on a true story of Stephen Glass, a writer for The New Republic, who, well, let's just say he didn't do his work like Hoffman and Redford do in All the President's Men.
When did this come out, Jimmy? Like 2001,
Right
2002?
about, yeah, it's about 5-6 years old, I say.
And I was really, this is a great film. And you're right, Jim, it did go under the radar. Hayden Christensen as Stephen Glass it's a fascinating portrayal of a young, ambitious man who really just wanted to be the story, as opposed to writing a factual piece. He forgot the first thing about good journalism. And this is a true story, and it's not unlike certain stories that would come later on. The New York Times reporter, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but another one who literally they just made up a story and somehow got through the vetting process, and the story becomes big news. And then you find out, I think it's Steve Zahn is in this. He's the investigative reporter that finds out that Hayden Christensen's story is full of crap.
Yeah, because he's just an online news
exactly.
news service.
He's kind of like fact checker or something, and he finds out he's like an early online kind of watchdog kind of fellow who catches every erroneous fact. Another great performance in this film is Peter Sarsgaard as Stephen Glass's betrayed editor.
Yes, but Peter Sarsgaard is really good in this film. A young Jason Robards, and the fact that he does have integrity. And when you said that Stephen Glass, forgot what he was supposed to do, I think, the problem with this, it's a very good film, but the problem with the writer himself is he knew what journalistic standards were, and he betrayed them anyway. That's the tragedy of his actions.
And I think the best scenes in the film, Jim, are later in the film when Sarsgaard, who initially defended him because it's one of his writers and he's a good editor, realizes that he's been lied to and betrayed, and it's devastating to him. It's almost like finding his wife in bed with another man or something. It's devastating because he believes in journalistic integrity. And I guess to some extent he's mad at himself because he had a little light on earlier in the film where he's kind of wondering, maybe he trusted him a little too much, but in his position and seeing the kind of man that he is, it's like Glass takes Sarsgaard's virtue and uses it against him.
Yeah, you're
and
right.
It's a classic. This guy, you just want to squash him like the bug he is after the movie's over.
Here's a scene from the film Shattered Glass. This scene starts out with the writers and editor of The New Republic talking about stories. Then it segues into Hayden Christensen, who is Stephen Glass, who is talking to a journalism class and talking about journalistic standards. This is from Shattered Glass.
The lawyers have asked us to tone down the cover on Serbia.
They have?
Yeah, they're afraid it might invite charges of libel.
Yeah, I know a little bit of libel law. It's only relevant if the person in question has been out of the public eye.
Well, yeah, so there's Serbia, hidden, unknown to the world at large, until it appeared on the cover of the New Republic, with our weekly circulation of 80,000.
81.5.
You almost done with it, Rob?
2 days, tops.
Yes, 2 days. 2 days from Hanukkah.
Hey, it's basically finished, for the most part.
Next up, Amy?
Just finished the piece on ethanol subsidies.
There are 16,800 magazines in this country, but only one calls itself the in-flight magazine of Air Force One. And that's the thrill of working at the New Republic. You're underpaid, the hours are brutal, but what you write gets read by people who matter. Presidents, lawmakers. Your work can actually influence public policy. That's an amazing privilege and a huge responsibility. I'm sorry, they don't want to hear the whole journalistic responsibility speech, do you? You just want to know how to get your name in print, right? Sounds familiar. Okay. Let me take you through the life of your typical piece so you can see where some of the hurdles are. We'll use one I wrote last year about a bunch of young Republicans at a conservatives convention. Now, journalism is about pursuing the truth. And I would never encourage you to do anything sneaky or dishonest in pursuit of a story, such as assuming a phony identity.
That is Hayden Christensen as Stephen Glass from Shatterglass. And actually what he does there is sort of infiltrate this Republican convention. And it wasn't really that underhanded. He just wanted to get news on it. But as we find out later, whether he even went or not is up in question. So 2 examples of journalism, one good and one bad. We highly recommend All the President's Men and Shattered Glass. Let's move on to this next great film, another rediscovery from 1988 and an early directorial work from Oliver Stone. And Bob, revisiting this recently, I just thought this really held up well. The fact that it was made in 1988, it seemed to be prophetic. It's called Talk Radio. It's a film version of the essentially one-man play written by Eric Bogosian about a talk radio host based on the life of a true story of Alan Berg, who, unfortunately for his controversial radio personality and antics, was murdered. But despite that very sensational ending, this film is so smart and so quick and just it gets into your shock jock mentality. It gets into the communication systems in America, the communication between people in America, and voicing your opinion. And he covers it all. It's an amazing film. I suggest if you're on a media jag like we are tonight on Take Two, Talk Radio, check it out.
This film stands up really well, Jimmy. When you watched it, I think, a week ago, and you've been talking about little else ever since. So I got it at home, and I'm going to watch it tonight again. We got a great clip from it with a very young Alec Baldwin, and I think we should play it.
This is Eric Bogosian in Talk Radio.
Give me 45.
You got it, pal.
Barry, I got somebody I'd like you to meet, please. This is Chuck Dietz, VP in charge of advertising, Metrowave, Chicago.
Oh, really? Metrowave. Very nice to meet you.
Mr. Champlain, it's my pleasure. I've been reading all your press clippings and listening to tapes of your shows for weeks.
And?
And you're really something. You're very funny.
I try to amuse. Look, I'm in the middle of a show right now, okay? I gotta move it along here.
You're a genius at work. Listen, Barry, Metrowave's gonna be picking up the show starting Monday night, link it to a national feed.
We've got some people at Humphrey's Coffee, Barry. They want to sponsor the show nationally.
We're in Golden 30, Barry.
Wait a minute, hold on. You telling me the show's going national starting Monday night? When did this happen? I mean, don't I get a say in this? You know about this?
Yeah.
Dan,
Barry,
what?
we really didn't know anything about it until tonight. No sense getting you all excited until it panned out. Chuck is here to be the eyes and ears of Metrowave, so to speak.
So to speak.
15, Barry.
Listen, Barry, why don't you go ahead? We can talk later.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Make your next trip something.
You know, hot show guy. We're talking Larry King here, coast to coast.
It's always a hot show, Dan. Stu, find me a catheter, will you?
Extra hot. We'll get a contract in this for 6 months.
Yeah.
You're listening to the best talk in Texas. Barry Champlain on KGAB.
You know about this?
Yeah,
chill, will you, Barry? The Bucks don't suck. Stand by.
555 TALK.
Yo. Metrowave Broadcasting is a giant media corporation specializing in broadcast radio. It has 357 affiliate stations in the United States and Canada.
2 minutes ago, I received a phone call from the man who controls those 357 stations, the president of Metro Wave Broadcasting. He asked me if Metro Wave could pick up this show, pick up Barry Champlain for national syndication, beginning Monday night. You know, I've had these offers before, and I've been asked in the past if I could ever soften my touch, go a little easier. And my answer has always been the same. Take it or leave it. He took it. And so, beginning Monday night, this show, Night Talk, begins national broadcasting. That means the nation is listening. You better have something to say. I know I do. And we have Chet from Mesquite on the line. Hello, Chet.
Eric Bogosian from the great film Talk Radio, and this film has a lot in it. It's jam-packed, great writing, and just the issue of debate itself is up for grabs in this film. Very highly recommended. Check it out, Talk Radio. Well, let's move on to the granddaddy of media movies. We're talking about the great Network, and we had to make mention of this on this program. We have another film, too, we'd like to get to before the end of the show. But, Bob, I was thinking about Network, and we could do the, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. There's also the incredible scenes with Ned Beatty talking about, it's Beale, Howard Beale's show, is disrupting the forces of nature, and according to Ned Beatty, the forces of nature is the whole money supply and everything. But a clip from Network, Network has those incredible, memorable sequences and quotes. But there's so much more in Network, talking about the inner workings of media. This is from Network. This is, station manager or CEO of Network, Robert Duvall, and a very interesting speech. This is from Network.
But the business of management is management. And at the time CCA took control, the UBS TV network was foundering with less than 7% of national television revenues. Most network programs being sold at station rates. I am therefore pleased to announce I am submitting to the board of directors a plan for the coordination of the main profit centers, and with the specific intention of making each division more responsive to management. Point 1. The division producing the lowest rate of return has been the news division, with its $98 million budget and its average annual deficit of $32 million. I know that historically news divisions are expected to lose money, but to our minds, this philosophy is a wanton fiscal affront to be resolutely resisted. The new plan calls for local news to be transferred to owned stations divisions. News radio would be transferred to the UBS radio division, and in effect, the news division would be reduced from an independent division to a department accountable to Network.
Robert Duvall from Network. We just heard that, all the news is going to be okayed by the top brass, and all the affiliates are going to be running the news that essentially will be okayed by the top management.
And it will be for profit.
Yes. Network has so much going on in it, folks. If you haven't seen it in a while, it was so prophetic. I mean, what you might have considered to be outrageous when it was made back in the 70s seems to be rather commonplace today. But still, Peter Finch, an incredible portrayal as Howard Beale, Faye Dunaway, and, of course, how can we forget
William Holden.
William Holden is incredible in this film. It's a great film. It's our last two films, if you want to talk about media, Network is it. And then we want to wrap this up with an amazing film that came out just a few years ago. It is, and the reason we want to put this at the end, it's completely timely. We're talking about a documentary film called Control Room. It's all about the Al Jazeera TV network. It's the most popular and largest Arab network in the world. Control Room takes place in the station during the time of the invasion of the U.S. in 2003. Now, if you can imagine, you're a media outlet, you have to get the news out there, and your country is about to be attacked by the United States. I mean, how do you feel as reporters? How do you cover it? And what is also interesting about this film is not only do you get the inner workings of Al Jazeera, But you see the representatives from NBC, ABC, CBS. You see all of these people working in the media, all working together. It is just a fascinating film. It is the ultimately timely media film that you could see right now.
Absolutely, Jimmy. I would recommend to any of our listeners out there who have not seen this film. I know a lot of you have, but for those of you who have not, you really need to see this, because Al Jazeera is not a bunch of bearded, turbaned fanatics. They're very seasoned news people from all over the country, all over the world, including the United States. And they're very professional, and they have even in this film, their perspective is very interesting and deserves a watch.
Here's a reporter from Al Jazeera Network, and this is from the Motion Picture Control Room, talking about the invasion of the United States.
They bombed this place in northern Iraq.
Smashed
Pulverized.
completely.
Dead bodies in mass. I mean, why?
We got the pictures and we show them. But we give.
Of course, we'll get grief from the Americans for showing these pictures, because we'll be inciting rebellion and will be basically instigating anti-American sentiments. I mean, I'm sorry. They can't have their cake and eat it. I mean, yeah, okay, you are the most powerful nation on earth. I agree. You can defeat everybody. I agree. You can crush everybody. I agree. But don't ask us to love it as well.
But the question is, who's going to stop her? Or to stop the United States? Who's going to do that? You need a new group. You need a powerful group.
The United States is going to stop the United States. I have absolute confidence in the American Constitution. And I have absolute confidence in the ability of the American people. The United States people are going to stop the United States empire.
That's from Control Room. It's a reporter from the Al Jazeera Network, and saying that the Constitution is actually going to stop the war in Iraq. But just imagine being a television station in Iraq when the U.S. troops come in. It's a fascinating look at media and extremely timely. That about does it for us tonight. Bob, thanks for this discussion. It just seemed to blast through the hour, but I think if any of these films you want to take a look at them, it might give you a better insight into that which we watch on a daily basis, or listen to, or read.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jimmy. It's been a pleasure being here tonight. We'll catch you here next week on Take Two.